Morning everyone, it's time to work on the Clio again. I've got a problem with my front suspension. I think it's the top mount on the passenger side. So have a look at this and see if you can see which side might be broken. So I'm not sure how clearly I did come out on the video in the end, but it is very clearly the passenger side. It's got a lot of movement when you rock the car. A really good way to tell with the top suspension mountings on these Clios is if you put the bonnet up and just rock the front of the car, just grab the slam panel and shove it up and down and look at the top of each mount, and you should be able to see quite clearly if one's moving more than the other one. Accompanying that, of course, there also was some clear noise from the top mounting on this side. So that's what I'll be replacing today. I don't know exactly which component within the top mounting it is, so I'm just going to take off the strut first of all, have a good look at it, and then I'll be nipping out to my local parts store to get whichever part it is that's failed. The first step, as always, is to jack up the car and support it securely on axle stands, and also make sure your handbrake is done up quite firmly before you start this. And I like to put chocks behind the rear wheels as well, just to stop it from moving anywhere. The next thing to be doing is releasing that ABS sensor from the bracket there on the strut, and I need to release these two large bolts here that hold the strut onto the hub carrier. That will free off the strut itself, and I'll be able to wiggle it out from that position. That's an 18mm. Improper use of tools. Wait, oh my god, no. When you take out that bolt, won't the spring release and kill you? Nope. At the top, firstly, anyway, it's held in by this cap, this mounting here. We do have to remove this to get the strut out. Even when you do that, it's not a problem. The spring itself is held in by a small nut beneath this. You'll see it later. So it won't just simply release and kill you, so don't worry. So now that this is freed off the strut, it's a case of wiggling it off the hub carrier just like that, and you can swivel the hub carrier just to one side. It can move left or right, and don't pull it outwards too much, just in case there's the drive shaft might come out from the gearbox. I don't recall if the drive shaft is physically held in or if it's just a push fit on this car. Whenever you move the strut, which is now sort of loose here, don't forget to be careful of this ABS wire. Now we just need to release this upper mounting here, so it's just that one nut there. And you might need to counterhold the top of the piston. It's got a hex fitting, I believe, inside there, so you might need to counterhold it. Alternatively, an impact works very well for this. Over to the inadequately sized vise. Now, it's time for some death. We need to compress the spring. To do that, at home at least, I have to use these. I don't enjoy using these. Probably neither will you. Now at this stage I'm unable to wind in these really much more. I don't fancy moving that too much more, and I don't think it will help. The end of the spring is just around there and it's not making too much difference. Because I haven't got a full spring, because part of it snapped, I've not been able to compress as much of it as I would like. So I'm just going to see how much leeway I've got by removing the small nut that's on top here. Just quickly show you that. There, so I'm just going to unwind that just a bit up here. Nothing will go flying until that nut leaves the threads here. As long as it doesn't leave these threads, nothing will go flying and hit you. So I'm just going to unwind it a little bit to see if I've got enough slack to remove it now, because I'm running out of spring compressor space. Okay, and that worked really well. So I've just unwound the nut. I use the impact because it's a bit easier as well. You'd have to, again, counter hold that potentially, just like you did before to get it off the car. But that now is loose, that nut, and if that's loose up there and this is all loose here, this isn't going to fly off and hit you, assuming these don't give way, which they could. So on to disassembly now to find out which components failed. And yes, it's just started raining, if you can hear that in the background. So now that that's been disassembled, my opinion on the component that's failed is this top bearing. This here is the spring seat, the main steel spring seat. There can't be play in that. This rubber component which goes over this bearing, the bearing sits there, and this rubber upper bushing which sits there, as you just saw as I disassembled it. There's no play in this, and it can't really give too much play. It's a steel sort of structure inside. It's just coated with rubber. The main areas of rubber are all on the outside here, not really on this inner section. There's no play in it, there's no cracks, nothing like that, so it cannot be that piece. I just removed the boot a moment ago. That just simply slips off there, that way up. And that's the lower seat, it just fits in here. There's nothing to do with that. And this is just the upper retaining nut. So the only thing that could be giving me play, well, within reason, is this bearing here. And there is some play. You can see that. Now I don't know how much a new one has. Maybe that's not that bad, and maybe that's not what's causing my problem, but it is some play. It is reasonably old. I think there's a date stamp on it somewhere. It's probably the original. So I will go to the parts store and replace that one. It turns fairly freely. The other reason I might have been getting play on this side of the suspension though is simply because of the broken spring. There will be less spring pressure on this side of the car, this corner of the car. So it might have been potentially unloading the top mount sometimes over bumps and things like that, momentarily unloading it, or at least more unloaded than it would ordinarily be. So that could be the reason as well. Regardless, that's the component I'm going to replace. I clearly do have play in there. It was knocking like hell, and there was a lot of movement at the top of the car. That's my prime suspect. Yeah, I've just gone out to get some new parts for this now, and I just need to take off the old spring compressors, from the old spring I should say. I've done this outside to avoid unnecessary damage inside the garage should it all go wrong. Something that will be a good idea is just putting it under a bit of carpet like I've done here, or something, some heavy kind of blanket. At least if it does go wrong, it should hopefully kind of dampen the effect. So with the new spring fitted onto the strut here, I just need to wind it up now and put on all the top components. So that's about the maximum I want to give it on the spring compressors. I really don't like doing these up. I've now fitted everything back on top, and just to show you that order. So don't forget the boot to put back on the piston, and then the spring cap. Make sure that end locating part of the cap goes next to the same part of the spring, the end of the spring just there. The new bearing, look at that, it does have some movement in it designed in, so maybe that wasn't my problem in the end. I'm not really sure. Maybe it was just the broken spring. And then this large top mount which comes with this separate steel sort of spacer almost, which goes into the top. Now I don't want to have to wind these up any further. They're already a bit dodgy, and I could already see the top of the piston just there. So what I'm going to do is just push this down enough so I can fit the nut on it, and then screw that down. Once that's down, I can then release the spring compressors. Okay, great, that's down just about enough now so it's caught on the thread. So I'm just going to wind it on a little bit with the impact just to make sure it's fully caught, and then I'll slowly start relieving the pressure on these, because I really don't like having these on here longer than I need to. And that is now tightly installed. Time to remove the spring compressors. With that complete, and with that nut tightened up sufficiently, it's time to put it back on the car. Checking the Haynes manual, it is 105 Newton meters for these two bolts. Now that they're mounted up and they're tight enough, don't forget to put this ABS wire back in this little clip. Just pushes in, and then we need to tighten up that. What I find helpful whenever I'm installing a strut like this is to lift it up inside the wheel well first of all, and quickly with one hand attach this on the top, still with a bit of slack in it. There's plenty of slack down there, just so I can wiggle it around at the bottom, but it prevents it from falling down on me when I'm wiggling about down there. So I've just done out a couple of threads at the moment. I now need to screw it all the way up and tighten it. Now, just to make sure this is tight, I'm going to use the proper method of an Allen key in the top here, plus what you want is a really deep section ring spanner just to get down there. And that is now the job completed. I'm not going to show you the final bits, which is just putting on the wheel. You don't need to see that. So just make sure that these are tight, that's clipped back in there, the ABS wire, and that you've tightened up that one sufficiently, and you'll be good to go. You may or may not want to get the tracking the alignment carried out on the car after this. You may find it might be a little bit out after disturbing some of these components. But thanks very much for watching.